What if I told you people were making mead 1,000 years ago with no idea yeast even existed? And some of their batches actually worked. But here's the wild part. If you made mead that way today, you'd probably ruin it. The difference between success and disaster, it all comes down to what we've learned and what they didn't know. Let's take this all the way back. Back then, there were no thermometers, no hydrometers, not even a word for fermentation. You didn't have instructions, you had instinct, local lore, and blind trust in the bubbling power of honey and thyme. In Norse cultures, mead called mayut or mayuth was brewed in open wooden tubs or clay pots. Honey was diluted with water and flavored with herbs like juniper, bog myrtle, or birch bark. Wild yeast from the air or ingredients kick-started the fermentation. It was actually consumed fresh, cloudy, slightly fizzy, and often still fermenting when served. Among the Anglo Saxons, mead flowed in the great mead halls of kings and warriors. Vessels unearthed in burial sites contained traces of honey, beeswax, hedgerow berries, and even cereals, suggesting hybrid styles, somewhere between a mead and a braggot, and an herbal tonic. They likely used large ceramic vats or wooden barrels and sealed them with wax and fat. Local herbs like meadowsweet or heather were common additions, not just for flavor, but possibly to help fermentation or preservation. In Slavic and Baltic regions, medovukha was the go-to style. The honey and water were often boiled first, which caramelized the sugar and helped preserve the mead. Berries and herbs might be added, and the mix was left to cool before fermenting in wooden casks. These meads were aged in cool cellars for months or even years, and used in rituals, weddings, and festivals. In Ethiopia, mead known as tej is still made traditionally. Honey is mixed with water and gesho, a bittering plant similar to hops that also provides wild yeast. Fermented in porous clay pots, tej is cloudy, lightly carbonated, and served fresh on holidays, family gatherings, and religious events. Celtic mead-making traditions were tied to rituals and seasonality. Archaeological findings suggest the use of heather, meadowsweet, and hazel in fermentation. While few written records survive, it's believed the early Celtic brews were both sacred and medicinal, brewed in wooden vessels and shared during seasonal festivals. In ancient Egypt, mead was often made from diluted honey and fermented bread mash, lightly spiked with dates or figs. It was used in both religious offerings and medicinal practices. Ceramic jars discovered in tombs show traces of honey and fermentable grains, pointing to a rudimentary but effective brewing culture. In ancient China, records from the Shang dynasty reference alcohols made with honey and grain, essentially an early form of mead. These brews were sometimes used in ancestor worship or court ceremonies. Fermentation likely relied on environmental yeasts and primitive koji molds for starch conversion and fermentation. None of these cultures had sanitation in the way we think of it. Vessels might be rinsed with water, smoked with herbs, or reused just as is. Everything depended on tradition, climate, and luck. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it soured, sometimes it exploded. Now picture today. Modern mead makers don't guess. We control every variable. You pick your yeast strain for specific results. You measure original gravity. You track pH, you time nutrient additions, you degas and oxygenate. What used to be guesswork is now precision. What used to be luck, well, that's science now. And honey, that changed too. 1,000 years ago, honey came raw, straight from the hive, full of wax, pollen, and wild microbes. You didn't choose a floral source like orange blossom or meadow foam. You just used what you had. Today we choose honey like a chef chooses spices, based on aroma, sweetness, and even mouthfeel. We can go raw or filtered, pasteurized or wild. That alone gives us control ancient brewers couldn't imagine. But the real revolution? Yeast. Back then, no one pitched anything. They relied on wild yeast floating in the air or clinging to fruit skins. Would it ferment fully? Could it tolerate alcohol? Would it taste good? Total mystery. Now we select yeast strains like QA23, 71B, Kavik, Lutra, EC1118, SO4, SO5, all to match the style we want. Want it crisp or dry, smooth or fruity, big or bold? You choose before fermentation begins. Even the water changed. Today we use reverse osmosis or filtered water. We test for pH. We remove chlorine and chloramines. It's all calculated. Back then, you used what you had: stream, well, or snowmelt. Sanitation? That's a modern invention. Ancient tools were rinsed, smoked, or maybe wiped with herbs. Sterile? Never. Now we sanitize everything: fermenters, bottles, siphons, before and after every use. And that's how we protect our yeast and our mead. And here's something most people don't consider: stabilization. Back then, if your mead looked still, you bottled it. But without potassium metabisulfite or potassium sorbate, fermentation could restart in the bottle. Today we stabilize, we back-sweeten, and we bottle with confidence. Yet, even with all this progress, traditional mead making still survives. In Ethiopia and parts of Europe, brewers still make tej and mayut the old way: raw, wild, and rustic. Not polished, not predictable, but full of story and culture. Modern mead makers want consistency, balance, reliability. That's why we use hydrometers, pH meters, nutrient schedules, and pressure fermentation. These tools save time, money, and frustration. So next time you pour a glass of mead, think about this. You're part of a 1,000-year tradition, but now you've got tools those early brewers couldn't even imagine. You don't even have to guess. You don't even have to hope. You can make incredible mead on purpose. Thanks for watching, and cheers to the next 1,000 years of mead. If this video helped, hit the like and subscribe for more no-fluff, results-focused mead-making strategies that actually work. Have a question? Drop it in the comments. I actually read them, and I'm happy to help. If you want the full deep dive, grab your copy of the Practical Mead-Maker, packed with everything from honey and water chemistry to flavor balancing, off-flavor fixes, and step-by-step troubleshooting, all explained in a clear, beginner-friendly way. You'll find the link in the pinned comment or video description, along with my go-to tools and gear. Check out my other videos and playlists here to help you master every step of the mead-making process, from advanced techniques to building unforgettable flavor. Happy fermenting, and here's to your cleanest, strongest batch yet.